So coming up later on in the week is going to be PFL number 4 of the 2024 regular season, and it is going to be taking place on Thursday night at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, not on Friday and not on Saturday. It's going to be on Thursday, so that's the time that they've decided to go with, and I guess we're just going to have to watch it on Thursday night, aren't we? Except, unfortunately for me, my exam is actually on when this card is on. So when you're watching this card, think of me. I'm in the middle of a solid mechanics exam, which is going to be a fantastic time. It should be a pretty good card. Now, generally, when you are predicting PFL, especially in this kind of time period of the tournament, it is best to kind of look at who do you think the PFL wants to progress in the tournament, because although they say that they don't do this, they do match make some fighters in a way which guarantees the fighter that they want to get into the single elimination part of the tournament there. So definitely a good way to kind of parlay fighters that you believe that the PFL is going to be wanting in the second part of the tournament. And it's also worth noting as well, which I probably will reference again later on in the video, a lot of these fights have been made on very, very short notice. But yeah, that's kind of it. I will be also writing an article for this card and also just all of the other regional MMA shows that are not related to the UFC, but my UFC predictions are already out on my channel. And that article will be on the We Want Picks premium membership side of their website, which is $10 per month. But if you do sign up using my code ARTEM, you can support my channel, and also you can get a 3-day free trial, which you can cancel during that 3-day period if you do so desire and it's not quite what you want. And with all of that being said, let's just get into my predictions for this card. So the first fight on the Tapology bout order actually is Denis Goltsov taking on Thiago Santos, but I do have a pretty good feeling that this fight is actually going to be delayed and a little bit later on into the card, but I am just going to go by the Tapology order so I know what fights I've talked about. This fight was made on short notice. To my understanding, Thiago Santos actually accepted this fight last week, so he's only had about 2 weeks to prepare for the matchup, and so have a lot of fights on this card. In fact, PFL, for some reason, so many fights get cancelled, and there is probably a pretty good chance that at least one of these fights I'm about to start talking about probably won't happen. I mean, that's a lot of cancelled fights for a tournament season on one card, and this is one of them. Goltsov was meant to take on Sergey Biastini, which would have been a fun one, striker versus striker, but we're going to get an even more fun, and in my opinion, not a bad matchup as per se for Thiago Santos, because I actually don't mind the move for Thiago Santos moving up to heavyweight at this point in his career. He is 40 years old. He isn't the tallest guy in the world. He is 6'2", but he does still carry a lot of power, and I'm sure that power probably will translate quite well up to heavyweight. He's lost quite a few fights. You know, he made his debut after fighting a couple times in the UFC against Rob Wilkinson, which got turned over because not only did Rob Wilkinson fail a drug test, Thiago Santos also failed a drug test, and then after that, he did fight against Yoel Romero, and in my opinion, not really the best look. Ended up losing to Yoel Romero at 205 pounds as well in that Bellator versus PFL kind of event. Now, Goltsov is a very good fighter. I thought that he had a very good chance of actually winning it all last year because he absolutely slept Jorgen De Castro and then submitted Jordan Heidemann. I thought he was looking pretty good until he did run into Renan Ferreira, who I believe ended up winning the whole thing, and probably thought he was going to get a fight against Francis Ngannou, but that never ended up happening. He come back with a good win over Linton Vassell, who is actually going to be headlining this event. But I think you probably should be able to do something similar to Santos. Now, Goltsov is massive. He is 6'5", 78-inch reach. Pretty big heavyweight. He does weigh in, not near the limit, but still at 245 pounds. He can strike. He can wrestle. I think his striking probably is the most dangerous part of his game, because we have seen him knock guys out with one punch, like he did knock out Jorgen De Castro. That win hasn't aged amazingly, but it was a decent win at the time, as De Castro was a former UFC fighter and had a lot of success fighting for Eagle FC. But at this point for Thiago Santos, I think it probably is pretty fair to say his best days are well behind him. He's had those injuries with his knees. You know, I think he injured those knees in the John Jones fight. He's never really been the same since. He did have success against Ankalaev on the feet, but then he was knocked out by Jamal Hill. and then lost to Wilkinson in a fight which he was actually out-wrestled, of all things, by Wilkinson. I think Goltsov, I think you probably could see the fact that Wilkinson was able to out-wrestle him and could probably find similar success. I do like Goltsov. I think the most likely chance of him winning probably is by a TKO in some sort, whether that's on the feet or on the ground. But yeah, I just think that we are going to see Goltsov just be the much bigger man, which is probably not something Santos is used to. Now, Oleg Popov is also fighting a short notice replacement fighter, as Oleg Popov was meant to take on former UFC fighter Blagoy Ivanov. Once again, I believe last week Davion Franklin has accepted the fight on short notice. Oleg Popov is very good. He's 17-1 for a reason, and he's fought decent guys recently. He just beat Steve Murray, who at one point was undefeated and was a very good Bellator heavyweight prospect. He beat Gokhan Sarakam, who's a dangerous striker in Bellator, and before that he was fighting on some, I believe, Russian MMA local promotions. Very good guy, dominant wrestler, and he just does dominate on top. He's not really the most exciting kind of guy to watch, but he is going to be taking on Davion Franklin, who is also pretty dangerous and also has a pretty good wrestling background. He was, once again, touted as a Bellator prospect that they were building up. He had a couple of fights. I believe he actually fought very much since the start of his career. He made his debut in Bellator, took on this guy called Everett Cummings, who probably has one of the most padded records of all time, knocks him out quickly, but then he just lost a couple of fights. Slim Trabelsi, definitely no shame in that, he's a very good fighter, but I think that we can see Oleg Popov go out there against Davion Franklin and get the takedowns, and I think land good ground and pound. It's on short notice. With heavyweights, it's probably not that big of a deal, as they're not really cutting weight like other fighters are in other weight classes, but yeah, I would say that Blagoy Ivanov is probably a tougher fight for Oleg Popov stylistic-wise than Davion Franklin is. I think we're going to see Popov get the takedowns. Slim Trabelsi was able to get the takedowns. I think Popov is going to be as well. I mean, Popov has kind of proven to be a very dangerous guy at this weight class. You guessed it. Another short notice fight. It's going to be Danilo Marques was originally meant to take on Marcelo Nunes, and I was actually going to have a very hard time predicting that fight because Marcelo Nunes is actually a very good grappler, as so is Marques, and Nunes is dangerous, but he's got terrible cardio. But now he's going to be taking on Tim Johnson, who once again I think also accepted this fight last week. In fact, Tim Johnson actually, I believe, was released from Bellator after the merger, fought on a regional promotion about a couple of months ago, and now he's back. He's back under the Bellator banner, except now fighting for PFL, fighting Danilo Marques. And Danilo Marques, you may recognize him from actually fighting for the UFC, and I believe he was actually the debut fight of none other than Jailton Almeida at 205 pounds. Since then, he has moved up to 265, has looked decent, actually lost to Marcelo Nunes last year, and then was going to do the rematch. And that's something I didn't know. I didn't actually know there's been multiple opponent changes for Danilo Marques. But Danilo Marques, he's a decent grappler for the weight class. He's not the best striker. He's fighting Tim Johnson, who actually had mixed success for Bellator, but, you know, he lost to Fedor. Where is he? Lost to Fedor about 2.5 years ago. Not a good look. Lost to Linton Vassell. Not a bad loss, in my opinion, at all. I'm going to go with Marques. He's had the full camp. I mean, so many different opponents have been changed. This fight actually might have been accepted just very recently, if it's a second opponent change. Tim Johnson's just kind of like an older sort of style fighter. He's a wrestler. He wants to box and wrestle. Marques is decent. I think he can probably strike from range using his height advantage here and get his offensive grappling going. I will admit, I don't feel that great about this one, but I do think Marques probably should be able to win using that grappling. Now we have a fight which PFL definitely want Melissa Balic to win, or Melissa Balic, I guess maybe could be how her name is pronounced. She is fighting this lady called Kristina Katsikis, who is 1-2, hasn't fought for 3 years, and was used to build up Sumiko Inaba's record, who I will talk about in a second. The issue that I kind of potentially have with this matchup is Melissa Balic has a kickboxing background, and Katsikis has a grappling background. And I'll be honest, I don't really know anything about Balic, because I did watch a couple of her regional fights, but I didn't really get anything out of it. And even like by regional fights, I mean her amateur fights, I really didn't get much out of it. I went to her Instagram to see if anything else was going on, and I'll be honest, some of the comments on there were were interesting reads. A lot of men in our comment section definitely need to find Jesus, but aside from that, don't bet on this fight. I don't think you need me to tell you that, but trust me, don't bet on this fight. It's just not worth it. Balic is probably going to be the favorite. She probably will win because she's fighting a lady with a losing record who hasn't fought for years. But yeah, the PFL just want to build up Balic because I think it doesn't take a genius to understand she is very attractive, and I guess they're trying to kind of make her their Paige Van Zandt, because Paige Van Zandt became an absolute superstar when she was first signed to the UFC way back in the day. So maybe PFL are trying to do something similar to that with Balic. Balic does have a decent sized Instagram following, about 100,000 followers, but a lot of those comments, if you are not reading the men that need Jesus, there's a lot of bots on there as well, so I don't even know how legitimate that is. Balic should probably win. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why she has been signed to the PFL. Now we can talk about Sumiko Inaba, who did actually beat Katsikis earlier on in her career. And Bellator actually built up Sumiko Inaba for a very long time and gave her some pretty favorable matchups. A lot of her fights also took place in her home area, I guess you could call it, home state of Hawaii. But now that she entered the PFL, not even the PFL, she just lost to Denis, who's actually a very talented striker, by the way. I always didn't really feel that great about Inaba, to be honest with you, because she's not very big for 125, and she was kind of just barely getting by quite a few of these earlier opponents that she was being given. I think it was this fight here against Nadine Mandial, which kind of raised a red flag for me. I think I probably still picked Inaba to beat Keelhots anyway, but yeah, I think Inaba's going to win again. It's a tough one because Inaba's a really odd fighter because she is a very good grappler, but she's also a very good striker. So she isn't just like a wrestler or a grappler, or she isn't just a striker. She is a very well-rounded MMA fighter overall. I think in this one here, she probably is going to have the striking advantage and should stick to that. But it is also worth noting as well, her opponent has fought at 115 pounds before. Her opponent also does have quite a bit of grappling experience and has actually has actually lost to a lot of fighters which you may actually recognize. Former UFC fighter Silvana Gomez-Juarez, who had a very fun run, even though it didn't last long. Monster at Kaneho Ruiz, former UFC fighter, and then Kanako Murata, who's not only on this card, is a former title challenger, I believe, for the Bellator Championship there at women's 125 pounds. I'm going to go with Inaba. I don't feel that good about it. I think that she is going to be the better striker in the matchup, and I think that's what it comes down to. Saray Orozco does win a lot of her fights using her grappling, but she's not that dangerous. I know Inaba did just lose to a really good striker recently, but Denis Keelhots has a professional kickboxing background and is very good at striking. I think we're going to see Inaba go out there and win by decision. Juliana Velasquez is being given, in my opinion, a pretty good comeback fight for her. The thing that does surprise me every single time I look at Juliana Velasquez is the fact that she is not getting much younger at all. In fact, she is 38 years old. But if you guys are unfamiliar with Juliana Velasquez, she had a pretty dominant run in Bellator. At one point, she was 12-0, beat Alimale McFarlane. I thought she had beaten her twice, but she only beat her the one time. And then beat Denise Keelhots, who I was talking about before. And then she lost to Liz Carmouche, and because she was a former undefeated champion. And I think the stoppage was also quite controversial at the time. She got a rematch, which she lost, but then she also got a trilogy in the PFL in the first episode of the season against Liz Carmouche, and she lost that one as well. Now, Velasquez is actually a very good grappler and a very good striker. Carmouche was just kind of able to outmuscle her in a lot of positions and dominate in top control with her wrestling. I think this is a pretty significant step down in competition for Juliana Velasquez. She hasn't won a fight in a very long time, almost 3 years now. I think that she should be able to get one over Lisa Mauldin, who also come over from Bellator in the merger. She didn't come over from Bellator in the merger. She came over from the PFL Challenger Series. I really thought I had seen her fight for Bellator in the past, but I am kind of expecting Velasquez to get this one done here. She was brought in the first episode in 2024 for Dakota Ditcheva to get a win over her, and I will talk about Ditcheva in a second as well. But she did beat Helen Peralta, who was on the Ultimate Fighter a couple of years ago, managed to finish her, which is a decent win, I guess. I think Velasquez is going to get it done, though. She's a former champion at the end of the day. She does have very good grappling, even though she was getting out-muscled a lot by Liz Carmouche. I'm going to go with Velasquez here. I think Velasquez probably even might have a chance, maybe, of finding a submission over Lisa Mauldin in this one here. I mean, Mauldin literally got knocked out just over a month ago, which is something I haven't even been touching on, that I somewhat disagree with the PFL on, is the fact that a lot of these fighters in the first round can get knocked out, and then they can fight in 5 weeks' time, you know, and potentially get knocked out again. It happened, I believe, in the first major season that they had. They had this guy, he was from Europe, and he fought a former UFC fighter who was Russian, whose name I've forgotten, but he was at middleweight, probably 205, and he got absolutely slept in in episode 1, and then 5 weeks later just got absolutely slept again. I don't know. It's interesting anyway. Ilara Joanne is going to be fighting Shanna Young. Shanna Young's interesting because she was released from the UFC and then found mixed success in the PFL. She did recently win over Sandra Lovato, who, if you guys may or may not know, was on the Contender Series, I don't want to say last year, but the year before that. And I think she lost to Karolina Wojcik, or I'm pretty sure it was Karolina Wojcik. But yeah, she out-wrestled Lovato in that one there, got it done. Then lost to Kana Watanabe, but I rate Kana Watanabe very highly, probably is one of the favourites to win the whole season. But before that, of course, she was in the UFC and was finding mixed success. She did finish Gina Mazzani, but then had a rematch against Miranda Maverick, which in my opinion was just a weird fight to take because she had actually lost to Miranda Maverick previously in the first round. But yeah, she lost that fight to Maverick, got released, signed over to the PFL, and is going to be fighting Ilara Joanne. I think she should be able to beat Ilara Joanne, though, because Ilara Joanne is a good striker, too small for 125, and doesn't really have grappling, whereas Shanna Young can be very dominant on top. I would look potentially at a similar stylistic matchup in the Gina Mazzani fight to the Ilara Joanne fight, except Mazzani, I think, was actually quite a tall, rangy striker. Ilara Joanne is small. She's 5'3" with a 64-inch reach, but she's fast. She's a quick boxer on the inside. Does have decent striking as well. But 3-fight losing streak now. I believe every single fight she's had, you know, just got submitted, out-grappled by Taila Santos. Got submitted, out-grappled by Gina Bishop. I believe Bruna Allen actually struck with her and won that fight on the feet because Bruna Allen is a Muay Thai specialist as well. Shanna Young, I think she's going to go out there, use that size advantage that she does have that wrestling advantage that she does have, and debatably the experience advantage she's got from fighting girls in the UFC, even though Ilara Joanne has been fighting in Bellator for quite a long time. That's the prelims kind of over and done with. The next fights in the main card, in my opinion, are significantly more exciting, and I cannot wait to see, once again, how does Taila Santos look in the PFL, because I'll probably get to it when we get to Ditcheva, but I think that Taila Santos probably is the favourite to win the whole season, you know. Taila Santos was in the UFC. She lost that fight to Valentina Shevchenko, which a lot of people think you could score for her based on the first 3 rounds. And then she goes out there against Erin Blanchfield and does lose a decision. A little bit of controversy kind of around that, and a lot of people probably don't know necessarily why she was released. But I think it was due to visa complications with just some other background sort of stuff, which I probably won't get into because I could be wrong, but I do believe Santos was struggling to get a visa to fight in the US, but it obviously haven't stopped her fighting in the PFL, so yeah, I do recall there being some reason why the UFC released her, but I mean, PFL have had no issues with her, in my opinion, from what I've seen anyway, getting her to fight in the USA, so who knows? She did fight in the first week, submitted Ilara Joanne, who I mentioned before, but before that, of course, we all know her from her very impressive run in the UFC. Started off, I believe, 15-0 as a prospect. Yes, 15-0 as a prospect, won in the Contender Series, lost her debut, and then after that, maybe it was this. Maybe it was just all of these cancelled fights, to be honest. That would make some sense. But she had a bit of a run. When she submitted Joanne Wood, that was a very impressive performance there. But now she's in the PFL, she's got very good grappling, and she's fighting an opponent that has very good grappling because Gina Bishop does have grappling experience. Now, to the level that it is. I do believe it is international level. It is international level. There you go. Tapology literally tells me what I was going to say. But I know she does have very good national level grappling and has won multiple tournaments in the USA. And look at that. She has competed in the World Championships as well on multiple different occasions. Since then, she transferred it over to the LFA, where she was quickly picked up by Bellator, won a lot of fights by submission early on, including her first round matchup over Chelsea Hackett, who's also on this card. The problem with Gina Bishop is I think she is a little bit one-dimensional. I do think that as long as the fight is on the feet, I think Santos is going to be the much better striker out of the two. I mean, Taila Santos held her own in the striking against Shevchenko. I believe even had a lot of success against Joanne Wood in the striking as well in that first round, and also had success in the striking against Erin Blanchfield. All very highly ranked, not just UFC fighters, but also just highly ranked women's flyweights in general as well. Gina Bishop wants the fight on the ground. Santos is big for 125 pounds. I'm pretty confident Santos is going to be able to defend takedowns or whatever it is Gina Bishop is going to be using to try and get the fight down to the ground. And even then, if the fight's down on the ground, Santos is a very good grappler and probably will be able to defend a lot of submission attempts that Gina Bishop will be going for, just kind of based on her grappling experience and skill set. So I do like the fact that Santos is much more well-rounded than Gina Bishop is in this fight here, and that's kind of why I'm going to be picking her to win. Now, picking her to beat Bishop by finish may be a little bit tough, but I think maybe there is a real chance of Santos maybe finding like a third round finish. It could be a TKO due to Bishop maybe slowing down a lot, but it also could be potentially submission of her own if Bishop does end up getting gassed out in the fight. But I do like Santos to win the fight overall. That is my pick. Now, Liz Carmouche is going to be rematching Kana Watanabe after having her trilogy with Juliana Velasquez. And, yeah, she's actually looked quite good recently, despite now she is 40 years old. And Liz Carmouche, I'm actually quite happy for her and what she has achieved so far in her career, because overall, I guess you could almost put Liz Carmouche in like an overall MMA sort of Hall of Fame, because she was in the first ever women's UFC fight when she did fight against Ronda Rousey, and even had Ronda Rousey in a little bit of trouble in that fight. Now, she did go up and down a little bit in the UFC before eventually signing on to Bellator and just starting her dominant run there. Beat Kana Watanabe in 35 seconds, and then went on to beat Juliana Velasquez in that controversial stoppage that I mentioned earlier, and then won the rematch. And then beat Deanna Bennett after Deanna Bennett missed weight, and Deanna Bennett was actually finding a lot of success in Top Control in that fight. And then after that, beat Ilima McFarlane and Juliana Velasquez. She actually has been very active recently in the last few years. But that run in Bellator is very impressive. Kana Watanabe, in my opinion, is actually very good. And the winner of this fight, once again, probably has a very good chance of winning the whole thing. The PFL has actually a very strong women's flyweight division, especially when you consider the fact that they do have a superstar in Dakota Ditcheva there. But Kana Watanabe, in my opinion, probably should have won this fight against Ilima McFarlane. In fact, I do believe she should have won this fight. She was out-grappling Ilima McFarlane and was doing more damage. Both of these girls are going to want to wrestle against each other. I do still like Liz Carmouche in the fight, because she's also kind of got that mental edge that she had the win. She won the first fight, and even though it wasn't 35 seconds because she caught her, it still is a thing to know that she has beaten this opponent, so maybe Kana might be a little bit more nervous about the fight. Now, Kana did beat Shanna Young in that matchup there, kind of showed off her well-rounded skill set that she does have, beat Vita Arteaga as well. I think she should have beaten Ilima McFarlane. She has got very good grappling, very good offensive wrestling. McFarlane was able to find success, though, in that offensive wrestling and grappling, which is why I am going to still side with Liz Carmouche, because I know, although Kana Watanabe might be able to find opportunities there, Liz Carmouche might also be able to reverse offense that Kana Watanabe is going to be going for in the grappling. So I like Liz Carmouche. I think that she should be able to get top control. I feel like if the fight plays out how I've described it, it's going to be pretty boring, just with Liz Carmouche kind of dominating on top with Kana, even though Kana is a lot better than just kind of accepting bottom position with Liz Carmouche. I think there probably will be a lot of grappling sequences, a bit of striking, but overall I think it's going to be Liz Carmouche kind of getting it done with top control and a bit of ground and pound as well. Kind of similar to the Ilima McFarlane fight, except Ilima McFarlane, instead of losing, Liz Carmouche is going to be winning. I hope that made any sense whatsoever. We've got another rematch coming up between Daniel James and Tyrell Fortune. In my opinion, the first fight was controversial. I don't know if anyone else really agrees with me on this one here, but Tyrell Fortune, when he got knocked out, how long ago was this fight? Was it this one? Why was it overturned? Did Daniel James fail a drug test, or was it due to the back of the head shots? Positive drug test by James. I actually did not know that it was overturned. Okay, what I was going to get into was the fact that I thought that it was controversial, not only because Daniel James failed a drug test at the end. I thought it was controversial because Daniel James actually landed a lot of back of the head shots in the stoppage against Tyrell Fortune. Now, how the fight played out was Tyrell Fortune found a lot of success in the first round in that matchup, was getting takedowns and had a locked in rear naked choke, but Daniel James just showed really good rear naked choke defense and was able to get out of that situation that he was in. The second round starts and just instantly Daniel James is kind of wailing his strikes like he does and lands big on Tyrell Fortune. And I thought it was a lot. I thought almost every single finishing shot was to the back of the head, and the ref was actually going to disqualify him. I genuinely thought that was what was going to happen, but no, James was awarded the KO victory. And then I didn't actually know that he failed the drug test. That kind of slipped my mind a lot, because he fought like 4 months after that in a main event against Marcelo Golm. So he must not have popped for much, or maybe it was a tainted supplement or something. I don't know, because he fought 4 months later in the main event against Golm, in a fight which, by the way, I picked Golm to win, and he got knocked out. So that was great. But it's a rematch. I think Tyrell Fortune does win the rematch. I think the odds for this one could be close, and maybe you get Fortune as the underdog because, look, 52% of people are picking James. Fortune is a good heavyweight wrestler, and he was finding success against Daniel James. I feel like maybe he could use that last fight as an opportunity to realize, hey, I can't stand with this guy, I can't strike with this guy, let's just take him down, because Daniel James can be taken down. In fact, Tyrell Fortune has actually proven that, and I think that he should be able to get down Daniel James, who is 42 years old now and just won against Marcelo Golm in the rematch. He knocked out Golm twice. I actually think I picked James that time, though. I learned my lesson from the first one, but I'm not going to learn my lesson on this one. I'm going to pick Tyrell Fortune to win this rematch here. I think he is going to be able to get it back. We saw in the first fight that he could get the wrestling going, that he could get some control going, that he could find the back and lock in a submission attempt. I think the Fortune gets it done with that wrestling there. And now we move on to the co-main event. A lot of talk is probably going to be happening around this one here, because Dakota Ditcheva, I feel like, is the PFL's kind of superstar fighter right now, because you're seeing Dakota Ditcheva on the PFL's Instagram, and I guess maybe her Instagram as well. I don't follow her, but I see her all the time on the PFL's Instagram. She's going to, I believe they're called MLB, like baseball games in the USA, and she's doing the pitch, I think is what it's called, when a celebrity throws the ball. And then she's also showing up to, I think she even showed up to like a New York Knicks game as well in the NBA. And she's just kind of like being a celebrity, I guess you could say, by like having all of these public appearances and kind of promoting the PFL. And I think she was even at like a big boxing event recently. The point is, Dakota Ditcheva, the PFL are putting a lot of money and funding and support and I guess publicity behind her to really try and make her into a star, because she is a very, very fun fighter to watch, and she is also quite marketable because of her fighting style, and also she is quite attractive as well, of course. So if you actually do watch her fights, she's very fun. She wins most of them by knockout, and most of them in the first round, which is very good to see. I mean, she kind of won her first couple of fights by KO in the first round naturally, and then the PFL created this PFL Europe, which of course she then went on to win. Won that by TKO in the first round, and now she's actually in the full tournament for the PFL, which I think is a little bit of a roll of the dice for the PFL, because it could work out super, super well, but she is going to have to eventually fight someone in these two fights here, which are, no matter who it is, will be a very tough fight for her, in my opinion, especially if it is Taila Santos. Now, there are still a lot of people on the hype train of Dakota Ditcheva, which I understand, because she probably is one of the best strikers in women's MMA right now. She's just been so talented the whole time, very technical, a lot of power as well behind all of those shots, and no one's even really been able to stop her. She's pretty untouchable right now, and I do think she does beat Chelsea Hackett to actually get to this prediction. But I did want to mention, though, a lot of people think she's going to win the whole thing, and I'm still a little bit reserved on that, because I do think a girl like Taila Santos can give her a lot of problems in the matchup. Chelsea Hackett, as you guys may or may not know, was at one point a very hyped up prospect from Australia. Won this fight here, I believe, in like 50 seconds by TKO. Won another fight on the regional scene over there in Australia for Eternal MMA, which is a great promotion. And then she lost to Victoria Leonardo, and she didn't really look that good against Victoria Leonardo. Took a lot of time off, come back for the PFL, I believe in the PFL Challenger Series, won that fight. And now she's also in the thing, but she's just kind of being used, I feel like, to build up Jenna Bishop and then build up Dakota Ditcheva. Hackett could maybe get some takedowns, get some wrestling going, but I just don't think the PFL have done her any favors whatsoever. She took years away from the sport, and now she's fighting Dakota Ditcheva. Now, do I think that Hackett could get something done? Maybe, because we have seen the fact that she can find finishes super quickly, that she can wrestle, that she can grapple, but at the end of the day, like, when I'm talking about Dakota Ditcheva, I'm comparing her and talking about her potentially fighting Taila Santos. I just think that we probably will see Dakota Ditcheva win again. Now, yeah, I think we see Dakota Ditcheva win this one here. I have actually seen some people picking Chelsea Hackett to win the fight, but I just Dakota Ditcheva's too good, and the PFL are definitely expecting her to at least make it to the finals, right? I think Ditcheva, okay, 1% of people are picking Hackett. I've seen some online talk, though, of people picking Hackett. Personally, I can't really get behind it. I do like Ditcheva. I like Ditcheva by KO as well. She's just been so dominant so far in her PFL run. It's actually been very impressive. And fighting in the main event is going to be Valentin Moldavsky taking on Linton Vassell. And in case you didn't know, this is actually going to be a trilogy, since these two have fought, of course, twice before and are actually 1-1 against each other. In the very first meeting that these two had, it was in 2019 under the Bellator banner. And in that one there, Valentin Moldavsky actually defeated Linton Vassell by decision. And then after that loss, Linton Vassell then went on what I guess you could say was a pretty legendary run of wins, because after losing 3 in a row, Linton Vassell, something happened, and he just won 5 in a row before getting stopped by Denis Goltsov. But then, of course, at the end of that legendary run, I guess you could say, that win was over Valentin Moldavsky in the rematch to get that win back, and it was actually in the very first round. And now these two are going to be meeting and fighting for potentially, especially for Linton Vassell, an opportunity to continue to fight in the single elimination part of the $1 million PFL tournament. I am actually going to side with Valentin Moldavsky to get it done. Now, Vassell actually is the more recent victor out of these two. He actually won only a year and 2 months ago over Valentin Moldavsky. But I do think Moldavsky should be able to go out there and get it done. Now, Linton Vassell is actually a guy that I have been very impressed with in his run, and actually was very impressed with when I was doing the tape study recently for his fight against Denis Goltsov. I did ultimately pick Denis Goltsov, but Linton Vassell kind of has an interesting style for heavyweight, because he's got a lot of really good movement. He's a very dynamic guy, very fast, very good movement, I guess you could say. Kind of doesn't move like a guy at heavyweight. He kind of moves like a middleweight, but at this weight class, which is probably how he was finding so much success. Has a pretty decent rangy kickboxing sort of style. He is a bit of a sniper on the feet as well, and just because he's so fast, a lot of these other typical heavyweights that may not be as technical as him just couldn't really land, and Vassell was able to go out there and find a lot of success. Now, Moldavsky has been a little bit up and down, actually fought for the title against Ryan Bader, and in my opinion put up a pretty good fight against Ryan Bader. Actually had Ryan Bader rocked on, I believe, more than one occasion. There is definitely one occasion where Bader was on skates by Moldavsky's strikes, but then he went on to kind of go a little bit up and down, I guess, a little bit of an eye poke against Steve Murray, put the fight away. I think Moldavsky actually did the eye poke to Steve Murray there. And then, of course, he lost to Linton Vassell, who he's trying to avenge here. Eventually got the win over Murray, and then won in the first round, of course, over Ante Deliha, who won the whole thing in 2022. And I could be wrong in saying this, and I am willing to be proven wrong. I think Ante Deliha actually was waiting around for a potential Francis Ngannou fight for quite a while. He didn't fight in the 2023 season, but he did fight once, I guess, against Maurice Green, but didn't get the first round finish, so we couldn't continue. But for a long time, Deliha was the rumoured opponent potentially for Francis Ngannou's MMA return, which we may see soon, considering he has fought a couple times for boxing. I'm sure PFL is probably saying, hey, Ngannou, we want to see you now in MMA under our promotion now that we've let you go out there and do your thing in the boxing world. But with that beside, talking about this fight here, which I just got incredibly off topic, I do think Moldavsky wins. Now, as I said though, Vassell does have incredible movement, but that sort of style, I have always kind of thought that it isn't going to get much better with age, and he is going to slow down eventually. And now we're looking at Linton Vassell at 41 years old. And not only really Linton Vassell at 41 years old, we're looking at Linton Vassell at 41 years old after getting knocked out literally 2 months ago. And that kind of is where a little bit of my issue does lie with the tournament system of the PFL. They're kind of trying to completely reshape the way that MMA works with the traditional belt system and the rankings and all that. But I think that's where the biggest issue lies, is the fact that you really can't have guys fighting every 2 months if they lose by knockout, you know, because we just saw Linton Vassell lose by knockout in his first round matchup by Goltsov. And he's just going to get back in there 2 months later. It's just a little bit too soon, you know, because when I played rugby, you know, to be fair, I was in high school at the time. So a lot of the time, of course, because we're high school students, I guess, they were trying to protect our brains a lot more as we're still developing. If you got knocked out on the rugby field, you got given, I believe it was called a blue card. And that meant that you couldn't train or play rugby for 6 weeks. You know, no contact for 6 weeks to let your brain recover from that concussion that you had. And these guys are getting in there and fighting after 2 months away. You know, he's just knocked out. Now he's going to get punched in the face again. He's probably been sparring as well. It just scares me a little bit. But yeah, I just think with the age, Vassell's movement, it's not the same. He just lost to Goltsov. Was out wrestled by Goltsov though. And I think Moldavsky can definitely look at that Goltsov performance and look to try and do the same sort of thing, as that is kind of how he did win the first fight against Linton Vassell. Ultimately, I think Moldavsky's going to end up winning the trilogy bout and winning the trilogy overall between these two. I think it probably is going to be a finish as well, and it will cap off what, in my opinion, is going to be a fun card. But dare I say it, I am more interested in the women's flyweight matches than I actually am in the heavyweight matches. It didn't really take me until like actually really looking into this card that I realized how stacked the women's flyweight division really is in the PFL. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the card. Should be a pretty good one. Definitely looking forward more so to like the future ones with the lightweights and also the welterweights and the featherweights. There are some fun fights booked, man. That Clay Collard fight, he's fighting, his name slipped my mind, but Clay Collard has a banger coming up and I'm hyped for it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next one.